we had been called to watch this particular film because of complaints by the public. This is readily made available in newspapers and our media statements that the scenes in particular was of the uniform of one of the school children in the film, and most importantly, the scene where the Chinese director actually made a lot of racist remarks against the Indian actor who was auditioning for the role. Um, and while I was watching it, I must admit it was very uncomfortable watch. I think if any one of you who has watched it, if any one of you have friends who are Indians or Malays or anyone who has faced discrimination in your daily lives, it's very difficult to watch, even though it was made as lighthearted and humorous. Um, and but it was very difficult for me as well to watch. I could only imagine what my Indian counterparts was feeling at that point. And I wanted to ask Ken actually. Ken, he didn't leave it at that. The scene could have been just a few jabs, so you're this, you're that, and that would be it. But he actually prolonged the scene, and it made it more difficult. It exacerbated my confrontation with the film, making the experience more intense and disturbing as it slowly revealed the character's prejudices. And so, even if I had more liberal views on artistic expression, I was at that point personally grappling with either sticking with an M18 or to even raise it to an R21. Since regardless of what I personally felt, I knew that I was there on the FCP to provide inputs on whether it was appropriate for the community. And race in this country is a very sensitive and an almost taboo issue. And so do note also that this came quite soon after the Innocence of Muslims debacle was making headlines over the world, and it was causing quite a lot of violence and concern for all of us here. And it was even during that period of assessment, actually, that an assistant director from NTUC was actually sacked for making disparaging remarks about Malay weddings at void decks. So understandably, I would think, although it wasn't really discussed as such, I think that the SCP was actually operating under very emotionally charged circumstances. And to reiterate what Ken has said, even though I believe it was a very sensitive issue, I essentially felt that if we could have allowed movies like Borat, why not now, where we have this film, especially if it's deemed as satire. But suffice to say, the decision went on, and MDA went to reverse its decision to give it an NAR rating, which is a not allowed for all ratings, which was tantamount to a ban. I'm also aware that this decision to ban this film is partially due to our society that has been sort of engineered, maybe not engineered, but conditioned to discourage any open discussion on race. Our conventional narrative on multiculturalism prevents sort of real issues from being discussed in public and prevents honest discussion through fear and self-censorship and deeper inquiry. To be here tonight to actually be able to talk about this, it wouldn't have been possible, I think, just 10 or 15 years ago. There seems to be a sort of belief. I mean, going through this process and experience, I sort of felt that there are segments of the community who believe that this film would somehow endorse and encourage racism amongst our young, and that our young would actually become racist. And not what I meant to was the film's message is actually to jolt us, to actually laugh at these ridiculous stereotypes and to think about the problems of our racialized society. I believe that no one is born a racist, and so I can presume that they can only have been socialized by interactions with their immediate circles or larger society. And I think if we can be honest and admit that all of us have faced racial stereotypes in one way or another in our daily lives. So I felt that we could have actually used this film to talk about racism and bigotry, and how does it actually develop in a person, and how it perpetuates in our own social milieux. Will banning such artistic expression help or deter us from actually evolving into a society that is fully aware and mature of what is good and bad? Another question is, can a film actually influence human behavior? A discussion that is happening in the US right now is questioning whether violence in films is the cause of the gun attacks and the violence that is happening in America. So is that a discussion that we should have? that film actually influences, or art actually influences human life. On top of that, actually, as a side to that, there was nothing particular in this film that felt hostile or perverted, despite its saucy title, Porn Masala. I had friends coming up to me and said, "What are you guys watching in FCP? You know, what's Porn Masala?" But in fact, it's the racist part is just a tiny part of that even shorter film. There was many other funny scenes with Adrian Palm and Pam Oi, which I really, really enjoyed. And I firmly believe that, you know, they handle the issue of heartbreak beautifully. And all of those are necessary ingredients of a good story that should be told. Art, I think, and particular films, have always been one of the best mediums to freely explore difficult issues, not just race, but drug addiction, sexual addiction, or racial discrimination. And this is happening everywhere, and not just in films. I think recently there was a South African artist who actually depicted the current president, Jacob Zuma, and former President Nelson Mandela as Caucasians, as whites. And after that, the committee actually came about and said, no, you cannot show this kind of imagery, and it had to be pulled out of the exhibition. The artist later explained that his work of art is actually to show that all of us are equal, despite the colors of our skin, despite all, we are all equal. But to this, we can ask, was the council's decision justified? Was it appropriate for the public, or did the artist go too far? And again, to reiterate what Mr. Arun has said, who determines what is appropriate for society? Who determines what is good and bad in art? And I think in our society, we're used to sort of government managing and sort of telling us what is good and bad. It's very convenient for us to see art and to utilize art as a medium to only promote certain values and community standards. But for me personally, I believe artistic expression, for the most part, has always been about presenting the devastation, the difficult, the ugly, and the dark part, the dark side of human lives. Art is about the pushing of boundaries through these expositions of the dark and taboo sides of our life, so people who are hurting can actually achieve catharsis and healing, and doing so reflect and rethink our assumptions and even grow. And while I think there are certain segments of the community who says, yes, society will grow, and that's where, you know, our standards will change. But I remember a quote by Andy Warhol who said, they say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. And while I don't agree with all of absolute freedom of expression, I believe artistic expression should be given that space with the right intent. And as I'm a particular lover of films and an avid moviegoer, I find that films are so visual. It confronts us to be self-reflexive. It forces us to question our own reality and ideas and assumptions. The movie Sex, Violence, Family Values may have run its course. The Amy Chong debacle may have ended, but if we continue to stay away from honestly talking and tackling issues of racism and race relations in Singapore, there is no stopping another incident from happening again and again. I think that Singaporeans can only benefit and should be proud of such a film by our own local filmmaker Ken Kwek, where we can laugh at ourselves on screen, and that we are mature enough, which I believe we are, to choose not to be racist and prejudiced when we leave the cinema and into reality. Thank you.
Thank Hannah for a very thoughtful presentation. The fourth speaker is Walter Woon. Walter is probably one of Singapore's most intelligent and multi-talented individuals. At the risk of embarrassing him, I'll just say what he's done. At a very young age, he was elected to a full professorship at the Faculty of Law. He's a living authority on company law. He then served with distinction as Singapore's ambassador to Germany, to the European Union, and to the 3 Benelux countries. He has served as our Solicitor General, as our Attorney General, and he's now come back to the law school, where he occupies the David Marshall Chair in Law. He's the Dean of the Singapore Legal Institute, which prepares law graduates for the practice of law. We worked closely, Walter and I, in drafting the ASEAN Charter. We spent a year together. He's my vice chairman of the Center for International Law. He has published 3 novels and it just completed